We're gathered here today to do some learning. Le'ilu Nishmas Simma Bas Avram Simcha. And I can't believe that the Tehillim group's still going. It's an incredible achievement and an ongoing achievement for all the people who commit themselves every week to carry on saying Tehillim. Le'ilu Nishmas, our dear friend Simmy. Today we're going to talk about mourning, the loss of mourning, and how we can connect to and commemorate the loss of the Beis Hamikdosh. The story is written about how people reacted after the second Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed. Because when the first Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed, the people were given a prophecy that it would last for 70 years. So there was hope. We don't have the hope of a tangible amount of time. And even then it was hard to see how 70 years is going to pan out and how is it going to happen. But we are still sitting 1,952 years after the Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed. And we are hoping every day that we will see the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdosh. But what I want to discuss today is, how did people react when the Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed for the second time with no prophecy and no idea? And how did they live? And how are we living today? Well, I can't talk about anybody else, but I personally find it quite hard to connect to the fact that we don't have a Beis Hamikdosh because we never saw the Beis Hamikdosh. But the people who lived in the immediate aftermath of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdosh, they lived it, they saw it, and they knew what they were missing. So for that, we're going to look at this story, Gemara Baba Basra Samach Beis. I'm not going to read a lot of the Hebrew because I don't want to spend a lot of time because it's, but you can, everyone wants to look it up in the Hebrew, in the original sources by all means. And people are fasting and it's a hot day. So our rabbis taught us, when the Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed the second time, Rabu Parshin B'Yisrael, a lot of people in Bnei Israel decided they wanted to take stringencies upon themselves. They became recluse, or they wanted to abstain from life. They could not come to terms with the fact that the Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed. And so they decided, Shelo le'achol basar v'lo lishtos yayin. They weren't going to eat meat and drink wine. There was no hope of redemption. So Rabbi Yoshua comes up to them and says to them, right, I think that what you're doing is too much of a harsh reaction to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdosh, because we can't live like this forever. It's fine if 2 or 3 major tzaddikim want to do that, but the general population can't hold by such a harsh reality. And obviously everybody was really badly affected because it was an immediate aftermath of the Beis Hamikdosh just being destroyed. So Rabbi Yoshua sort of chatting with them, and he starts saying to them, why are you not eating meat and why are you not drinking wine? And they said to him, this is a 3 on the list. How can we eat meat when the Beis Hamikdosh doesn't have a mizbeach and we can't offer up sacrifice to Hashem? Is it right that, in inverted commas, not Hashem doesn't eat the meat, but how could we eat meat and stuff our faces and there's no Beis Hamikdosh and there's nowhere? Shall we drink wine, which we used to pour the libations on the wine? Should we have wine? We can't do that. It's not, we don't have the Beis Hamikdosh. So he said to them with a bit of a sarcastic tone, I've got an idea. If you want to be harsh on yourself, I'll tell you what, don't eat bread because we don't have the menachos. We don't have the flour offering. And they're like going, right, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. And he was obviously joking and saying, no, you're taking it too seriously. And they're going, we can live, 5, Efshar b'peiros. We can live by just eating fruit, which they're talking specifically here about the shivas haminim, which are the native fruits of the land of Israel. And that would also be chitos, or else they could eat biscuits and whatever, anything made out of wheat and barley and figs and pomegranates. And then he says to them, well, okay, great. He thought that was going to be the way that he was going to, tell them to behave a bit more of a balanced, moderate fashion. And they said, okay, peros lo nochal. So he says to them, peros lo nochal shekvar bitlu bikurim. You shouldn't really eat fruit even because we can't offer up bikurim. So if you're going to take this to the nth degree, you can't have meat, you can't have wine, you can't have fruit. And they're like, you're quite right. Efshar 7, Efshar beperes acherim. We can eat other fruits. We can have, I don't know, oranges, whatever they might have had. I don't think they had mangoes then. So they're like clearly not getting the hint where he's trying to say, no, you're being too strict on yourself. So he says, Mayim lo nishteh. We shouldn't have water because we can't do nisal chamayim anymore. And suddenly the penny drops and they're like, well, actually, we can't actually live without water. So 9, shosku, they were silent. They could have argued and said, we can have fruit juice, we can have beer, we can have wine. I don't know. Maybe that's according to Tosfos, that's too restrictive. Maybe they couldn't understand. Maybe they realized he was right, or they were like, what are we going to say next? What's going to come next after saying no water? Rabbi Yoshua said to them, not to mourn for the Beis Hamikdosh is impossible because we've already been told that we're into Golus. But to mourn excessively, i.e. what you're trying to do, and tell the whole community they shouldn't have meat and shouldn't have wine, and then take it even more and more exaggerated, not to have fruit, not to have bread, is also impossible because the Chachamim do not issue a decree upon the public unless the majority of the public is able to abide by it. So it's called, we say that in Hebrew, She'ein gozrim gezerah al hatzibur ela im ken yochlim rov hatzibur la'amod bo. If there's something that the general population is not able to do, Chazal cannot institute that. And in fact, sometimes when we want to see what was the practice at the time or what the halacha was, we say, well, let's look at what people are doing on the streets, see what people are actually doing. We can actually see from that. So the Chazal would never issue a decree that was too hard for people. Rabbi Yoshua continues and he says, what we need to do, and these are what some of these things we still do today, is a person must, when the person decorates their house, they leave a small amount of it, and then they discuss how much it is, a one cubit by 1 cubit, which people have got the minhag to have something opposite the entrance of their door or over their door frame. Zeichel lechurban, and people still do that today. Not everybody does, and obviously there's discussions about what is an amma by an amma, and the sizes according to Reb Chaim Noeh and according to Chadnish. Rabbi Yoshua said, a person must prepare a meal, and if you prepare a meal, we should leave out a small item. I don't know how that is applicable today, what the small item is we might leave out today. Some people, we don't know what that is. I just say, like, miss out first course. Rabbi Yoshua says, a woman may wear her jewellery, but she must leave out a small thing to remember the destruction of Beis Hamikdosh. And I don't think that's something that we do. But maybe people do that, and maybe they think to themselves, I'll wear earrings, but I won't wear my tiara. I don't know exactly what it is. What's really interesting is these things are about the house, the food, and about the jewellery. And Ben Yehoyada says these things are all pertinent to the Beis Hamikdosh because the house is like the Beis Hamikdosh, the food is like the altar, the Mizbeach, and the jewellery is almost like talking about the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, lechovod ulesif ores, the idea of things we do in our lives that are parallel to what would have gone on in the Beis Hamikdosh. And the Gemara continues by quoting something that's probably famous to all of us. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my hand forget its cunning. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you. If I do not set Yerushalayim above my highest joy. And this is where the Gemara speaks about the word. What does it mean? Al rosh simchasi. And this is the source of the minhag, why just before a bridegroom goes to his chuppah, don't know if any of you have seen it, you have to be really like me with your video camera everywhere and catching it, or if it was your son, they often lift up a boy's hat, he was wearing a hat, and the rabbi would put like ashes on top of the boy's head at the moment of the chosan, going to his chuppah, the moment of extreme joy in his life. We hope it's the most extreme joy in his life. But as he's walking that, you have to, at the same time, we remember the destruction of the Beis Hamikdosh, and that is also the reason why we break a glass at the chuppah. As we are building our own Mishkan Ma'at, we remember that our joy is not complete, and we don't have a Beis Hamikdosh. And in fact, there are minhagim in Yerushalayim that people shouldn't have music and wine and things like that. But some people, that's why some people make the weddings outside Yerushalayim, because they don't want to hold by that restriction. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha says, from the day that the temple was destroyed, By right, we should have decreed upon ourselves not to eat meat and not to drink wine. But the Chazal do not issue a decree upon the public if we're not able to abide by it. And I think that what this Gemara is trying to teach us is that mourning should not be like a tidal wave, but it should be woven into the fabric of life. And we have to do certain things. We can't forget that we don't have the Beis Hamikdosh, but we have to somehow find a way that we can move forward and rebuild our lives. And the Gemara continues. And from the day that the wicked kingdom, referring to Rome, spread an evil decrees and harsh decrees upon us and nullified Torah and told us, made laws like we were not allowed to give our children, boys, bris milah, and some people say not allowed to do pidyon haben. In fact, if somebody was caught in the Roman times giving their son a bris milah, they would for sure be put to death. And the commentators say even if you were invited and you were part of what was going on, you would be put to death. So what response were Chazal trying to tell us we should have after such a tragic event of the loss of the Beis Hamikdosh? By rights, we should decree upon ourselves not to get married. So this is written obviously towards men. So it says in Hebrew, shelo lisah isha. But the result would be if we were so harsh upon ourselves that nobody would get married and nobody would have children. So you could take mourning to the nth degree and not carry out your life. But Chazal tell us, Elo heinach lohem Yisrael. We have the Gemara says, leave the Jews alone. It's absolutely impossible to live in a way where we say to ourselves, we can't eat meat, we can't drink wine, we can't get married. And what would happen? We would die out, because if nobody would get married, nobody would have children, and then our whole community would fall apart. After any traumatic experience, it's very difficult to know how to react. And if you look at the back page, there's like a picture based on the Kubler-Ross model, the 5 stages of grief. They wrote this in 1969, that when something bad happens, you can see like there's a smiley face and then like saddish face. People sort of can cope because then they sort of get into shock and then denial. And then people could possibly, over the passage of time, come to a level where they could accept something, or they could get into a depressive mode of depression. And it's very difficult. So how can we, and what can we do to live with a way that we can remember that we don't have the Beis Hamikdosh, but still keep it in our mind? Because we have to remember we're sitting here, Shivos B'Tammuz, and when it comes to Tisha B'Av, sit on the floor, say Echa. How can we connect? How can we connect to it? I thought, I asked a lot of people what they suggested or what they do that's helpful. And I found something written by a lady. It's source 23, it's on the back page of the sheet. It's by a lady, her name is Michal Avera Samuel. And she was a lady who came as a child from Ethiopia on the magic carpet to Operation Moses to Israel. And she says about her family, they never knew that the Beis Hamikdosh was destroyed. In Ethiopia, they thought when they got to Israel, they were going to see the Beis Hamikdosh and Kohanim. Now, for people who are too young, they didn't have telephones. I was even thinking 20 years ago, I didn't think I had a mobile phone. Maybe just, I don't know. Certainly not WhatsApp and Facebook and I don't know, all these things. This is what she says. She writes an article and it's called, "We Did Not Know How the Ethiopian Jews Discovered that the Second Temple Was Gone." Up until the age of 9, I lived in the world where the Beis Hamikdosh, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, actually existed. Like my parents and teachers, I believed that the Second Temple stood in its place in Jerusalem and was literally made of pure gold. I grew up hearing about the Kohanim, the holy priests, and how they worked in the temple. I fell asleep listening to stories about the halo hovering over Jerusalem and about the Jews who merited to dwell in the holy city cloaked in white garments. Blessed people blessed with pure hearts, clean thoughts and devoid of sin. Overhead, I would imagine the Shekhinah, the divine presence, as angels. The ideal of Jerusalem was the force that provided us with the stamina to persevere during the arduous trek through the desert. It was the dream that kept us going. We wanted to reach it, achieve it. We buried our beloved family members. left possessions behind willingly, lost them to vicious thieves. We struggle to keep going despite the terrible conditions and the hunger, only because of our goal to reach Jerusalem of gold. And so after many generations, stand at the gates of the Holy Temple. Then we arrived and discovered that the temple had been destroyed. Jerusalem did not appear as the place I had so badly yearned to reach. Learning about the destruction of the temple only as I reached the gates of the old city was an earth-shattering disappointment, and it left a great void in me that I have been unable to fulfill. When I read that, I thought to myself, I can't speak about anyone else, but I can speak about myself. Like, we have the privilege to go to Israel. I'm sure most of us have been to Israel many times, and we know that there's no temple. But what happens if we were hoping for it, and we were hoping to see it, and we never got to see it, and we thought we were going to see it? It's just it's almost earth-shattering to think what it must have been like for somebody like her to have thought she was going to see it and not see it. And I was thinking to myself, what things can we do in our lives to make it more meaningful, like it as meaningful as it was for her? And I know that some people, I've got my lovely teacher on my left-hand side. In schools, they sometimes do things like they build something, or like in camp in the summer, they make the kids build something, and you're so proud of your little achievement, and then they set fire to it in front of your eyes, the little boxes of bricks, whatever that you'd made at that time. And I think that some people think, there have been also exhibitions, for example, not exhibitions, talk about something else. I think that people think a little bit about something that's a more recent destruction, and that would be, a lot of people associate, what would it be like? And I know lots of people talk about Holocaust experience on Tisha B'Av, and of course it's a day that a lot of people, when they don't know when their loved ones passed away, they commemorate Tisha B'Av. There have been an exhibition, I don't remember, in 2014, there was the Buttons exhibition in Brent Cross Shopping Centre to show what the number 6 million looked like. And there was a film called Paperclips, and so sort of like to give us some scale of something that people we actually know with our own eyes lived through the Shoah and the catastrophe of the complete decimation and destruction. But I think that we have to, for me, I am so detached, I have to work on ways to not think to myself, I have to dull down my response. I have to sort of ramp it up. I have to think about it so much and think to myself, how can I make myself think that we are not living in the ideal state? We are not living in the Geula. And I can't really, my Yiddish isn't great, but I'm going to give this a try. Somebody told me there's a Yiddish proverb, and it says like this, and I don't mind if someone else wants to correct me. Als der Wurm sitzt in Grain, meint es is kein Sitzer nicht. Something like that, okay? Which means, well, it's not written on the paper. As a worm sitting in a jar of grain, the worm thinks he's living in a lovely sweet dish. What he doesn't know is he's sitting in grain. It's bitter, it's horseradish. We are living in Golos. Well, I don't say about you, me. I forget that ultimately we want the Geula, and there will be this utopian society. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm hoping every day, even now, I'm hoping this year it will be that Mashiach will come and that we can all celebrate together. And for me personally, talking about Simmy, and we're really honoured that you're here, Tova, is that I don't need a reminder. For the people who knew her, the pain's still there. And 20 years have gone by, it'll be 20 years. I don't know. It's still there for all of us. But we have to rebuild, and we're so happy that her children have got children. And if she would be here, she would be so proud of the legacy she left. And we should all gather together, b'mhera v'yameinu, with Mashiach again very soon. Amen.